Hey everybody, welcome back to HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com and another installment of Questions and Coffee with David. This is where I get up early in the morning, every single morning, and I'm doing all the business stuff and I'm answering all the questions that have come in over the last couple of days to try to help you make better music in your home studio. So if you want one of your questions answered in a future installment of this Questions and Coffee with David, please send your question to info@HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com. That's info@HomeRecordingMadeEasy.com, and I'll be sure to put your question and feature it in one of our upcoming videos. So before we get to this week's set of questions, if you like what you see on this channel, please hit that subscribe button. Also, please go out to Facebook.com/HomeRecordingMadeEasy and follow me there, as I'm always putting content up on Facebook that isn't necessarily a part of YouTube. You can also follow me on Twitter at HomeRecordingMadeEasy. I would greatly appreciate that as well. So now let's get ready for question number one. Okay, question number one comes in from John, and John writes, "Thank you for answering so many questions. Thank you for answering so many questions I have about StudioLive. I will continue to watch every video. I have a question maybe you can assist with in how I integrate the Apollo MK2 with StudioLive, being that they are both interfaces. I want to control the mixing with the StudioLive, but I want to utilize the DSP and unison technology of the Apollo and plugins. Any advice?" Well, thanks for writing in, John. Yeah, that's kind of tricky. So if you're using, well, say Studio One as I believe you're using as your DAW, because the StudioLive and the Apollo are both interfaces, you can't choose both interfaces at the same time. Any DAW can only see one interface at a time. So I just had this same situation where I had a Universal Audio Apollo, and now I have the StudioLive Series 3 32 mixer, and I'm actually sold my Apollo and I'm using the StudioLive 32. Now keep in mind that in the StudioLive 32 and also the Presonus Studio 192, they have the same kind of unison technology that's in the Apollo. The difference is you're only using Presonus plugins as opposed to Universal Audio plugins. So for your situation, if you want to record through the Universal Audio Apollo to get your tracks into Studio One using the unison technology and the Universal Audio plugins, you can do that. And then when you go to mix, you can just switch your audio interface in the preferences window. So that's the way to kind of do a workaround if you want to have two different types of technology there. It's not a problem. For me personally, I don't do a lot of tracking. I do mostly mixing. So to have the Apollo and the StudioLive didn't really make sense for my workflow. So I sold off the Apollo and I'm just using the StudioLive for recording and for mixing. But again, most of my work is more mixing and education and teaching, not so much recording. So I hope that answers your question, John, and now let's get ready for question number two. Okay, question number two comes from Robert, and Robert writes in, "Hey Dave, quick question. As I'm going through my mixing process and start processing plugins on my tracks, inevitably the volume of the processed tracks goes up. Am I supposed to keep compensating by turning down the gain of the individual tracks and or the mix bus to keep things at a -12 dB during the whole mixing process, or let that dB level rise as I add plugins? Hope this makes sense to you, Robert." Yes, Robert, thanks for writing in. Great, I'm glad that you're going ahead and you're gain staging before you're using plugins and keeping everything around a -10, -12 dB. That's perfect, that's what you should be doing, and that's what I advise everyone to do, to keep those levels conservative. The answer to your question is, no, you don't need to keep compensating as you're adding plugins and take the mix down to -10, -12. The reason why I tell you to start off at a -10 and -12 is because when you're adding plugins, you're going to inevitably raise the output level, and you're going to end up somewhere around the -5 to -7 dB at the end of the mixing stage. And that'll give the mastering engineer plenty of headroom to go ahead and put the final touches on the project. So if you start at a -10, -12, and you're raising up the dBs, so to speak, during the mix, during all that processing, you're going to end up somewhere around a -5, -7, and that's perfect. So you don't need to go in and keep compensating and keep bringing everything down to -12. The goal is not to be at a -12 dB at the end of the mix. The goal is to be somewhere around -5, -7 dB, which means you're going to start off at around a -10, -12. Hope that makes sense, Robert. Again, thanks for writing in. Now let's go on to question number three. Okay, question number three comes from Jerry, and Jerry writes in, "I use a Presonus Studio One version 3 and a Windows x64 PC. I've recorded a vocal track. Now I want to route that track through a reverb from the Studio One version 3 collection of plugins, but I can't figure out how to do it. Would you please help me by walking me through the steps? Thank you and God bless, Jerry. Well, Jerry, thanks for writing in. Sure, super simple. So here's the example. You have a vocal track that you've recorded. Now you want to route that vocal track through a reverb using a Presonus plugin. Easy to do. So in Studio One, down in the mixer view, where you have your console view, if you just right-click anywhere in that area in a grayed out section, you'll have a menu box that'll come up, and you'll see a choice that says Add Effects Channel. Add FX Channel. Click on that. That'll add an effects track. On that effects track, you're going to put your reverb on that track, any reverb you want. In your case, you're going to use a Presonus reverb. That's great. Add that to the insert effect of that effects channel. And then on the vocal track that you recorded, if you go to the send and you click the little plus button, you're going to send that vocal to that reverb. Okay, it's really that simple. So the concept is you have your vocal track and you're going to send the signal of the vocal track to the reverb, and then you're going to use the fader on the effects channel that you created to adjust the amount of reverb you want to hear. So it is really that simple. There's no magic or trickery to it. It's just send your recorded track to the effects track and you should be good to go. Hope that answers your question. If you have any other problems, shoot me another email and I'll try to help you. So now let's head on off to question number 4. Okay, question number 4 came in on YouTube from DrummerBoy100, and DrummerBoy writes, "Thanks, Dave. It was really cool watching you and the others work through things on the StudioLive 32 during the live stream. Thinking about getting this mixer for our church, and what are your thoughts? I've used the Presonus StudioLive 24.4.2 at the church before and thinking of upgrading. Also, another question is if you can tell me I know you're learning Wirecast, and we've been starting to Wirecast for our YouTube videos of our church services. And for some reason, it works great. And now all of a sudden, with a good internet connection and streaming, but it won't notify any subscribers, letting them know that we are going live, including myself. And yes, I have the notifications turned on. Any help would be greatly appreciated." Okay, so for the last part of your question, yes, if you turn on the notifications when people subscribe to your channel, it should send them an email letting them know that you're going live. If you're going, when you do go live on YouTube, if that's not working, that must be a YouTube thing. I'm not really sure, but I just know you need to turn the notifications on. You may want to contact YouTube. Excuse me, it could just be a bug or a temporary problem there. As far as it sounds like you're asking me between the new Series 3 mixers versus the 24.4.2 mixer, StudioLive mixers, is, what are the differences and what are my thoughts between the two? Now, I've used the older version, the 24.4.2, for a few years, doing lots of live sound with it, and that's a fantastic mixer. I've also owned the 16.0.2, which is the same exact mixer, but in a smaller form factor here in my studio before, and that's a great mixer as well. Those Series 1 mixers are really fantastic, and Presonus, I feel, really, revolutionized the digital mixing market. You talk about a mixer that sounded great, that was simple to use, that had a lot of great features that anyone in the studio or live could appreciate. Those mixers are great. Compared to the Series 3 mixers, again, they've really taken what was done on the 24.4.2 and they just really, injected it with a ton more features and a ton more things, and kind of, again, I feel revolutionized it again and brought it really a quantum leap forward between the two mixers. Now, does one sound better than another? I can't really tell if one sounds better than another. I don't have them side by side and have an A/B test them. I can tell you that both mixers sound great. I can tell you that the Series 3 mixers have a lot more functionality, a lot more, I feel, a lot more things it can do compared to the older mixers. A little bit more complicated to use at first because there are so many more things to use compared to the older mixer, and there are a couple of things where I've even had a problem transitioning, but between the user group on Facebook and between tech support and between the user manual, I've had no problem. It's just getting used to something a little bit new, but I really feel the Series 3 mixers are a quantum leap ahead of the older mixers. So if you're in the market for an upgrade, you can't go wrong with the Series 3. Whether you really need an upgrade or not really depends on what extra features you might be looking for and what your workflow is like. But I feel the Series 3 mixers are great and definitely a major step ahead of the old 24.4.2. So I hope that answers your question. If you have any other problems, you can certainly write in and I'd be glad to help. So now let's head on to the next question for this particular video, question number 4. The last question for this video comes in from Richie, and Richie has another StudioLive question, and he writes in, "Hey, I enjoy your videos. Question, does the new StudioLive 32 sound as good as the AI series mixers? The dynamic range is lower, and I think they went away from the Burr Brown converters. Just wondering if you had any experience with the previous generation to know if there's any noticeable difference in sound quality. Thanks. Well, Richie, thanks for writing in. Kind of similar to the last question. I have not used the AI series mixers. The mixers I've used were the series before that, which were the original StudioLive 16.0 and 24.2 mixers, and those things sound great. Again, compared to the new StudioLive 32, as far as sound quality goes, I think they sound the same to me. I mean, I haven't A/B'd them next to each other. Presonus will tell you that they sound better than the originals, and they probably do. I thought the originals sounded great. I think the Series 3 sounded great. The biggest difference for me with the Series 3 mixer is that it's really going to be a full-on surface control, and I believe the AI series mixers are as well. And I'm not too familiar with the AI series, but the Series 3 compared to the original StudioLive, and again, I've owned two of them, it's a quantum leap in functionality. It's got a lot more that it can do. It's really brought forward to today's technology, and it's just a fabulous mixer. And again, I've only had it for a few weeks as of the recording of this video, but thus far, I find that mixer to be fantastic. And the greatest thing about it for me is that it's going to be a full-on DAW surface control, not only for Studio One, but for all other major DAWs on the market. And that's really where the power is of the StudioLive 32 for my workflow. I'm using it more in the studio as a mixing tool and not so much as a live recording tool, but I find it to be great. Again, as far as the AI series mixers, I don't have a lot of experience with them. You may want to, do a little more research and see what other users might think if they have an AI series mixer. But again, I think the StudioLive 32 is a great mixer, and it is a quantum leap ahead of what they've done in the past. So thanks, Richie, for writing in. I hope that answers your question. If you have any more questions, you could certainly email me again, and I'll try to help you. So that's it for this week's edition of Questions and Coffee with David. Once again, please hit that subscribe button. Please go out to Facebook and Twitter and follow me there. And if you want one of your questions answered, please send them in to info@homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I will be sure to put it in a future Questions and Coffee video with David. So until the next video, this has been David with homerecordingmadeeasy.com, and I'll be sure to speak to you guys all soon. Take care.